Kathy Boufford is a seasoned family law attorney, mediator, and co-founder of Bellenot and Boufford LLC, based in Monroe, Connecticut, in the USA. I'm not sure if this is right, but with nearly 30 years of experience, I started very young, obviously. She has guided countless individuals through the complexities of divorce and family transitions. Kathy is the author of Divorce Matters, What You Really Need to Know When It's Time to Get a Divorce, a practical guide that empowers readers to navigate the legal and emotional aspects of divorce with clarity and confidence. Just a couple of statistics, because I love numbers, before we start, if that's okay. So, and these numbers aren't too different in the UK than they are in the US, but in the US, almost half of marriages end in divorce, 41% of first marriages, 60% of second marriages, and 73% of third marriages. The notion of the 7-year itch seems to be true with both first and second marriages ending up in divorce after 7 years, primarily. The divorce rate over 50s has doubled in the last 20 years, the so-called grey divorce. So it doesn't feel like it's a market that's getting any smaller. So I understand how high the demand is for your services. So thank you for doing this. Well, I guess I must want to start by asking about divorce in general. So it does still seem to be remarkably common. And this is despite the surge in available counseling and guidance and couples therapies and all that sort of stuff. And I wonder what your view was on whether people just don't take those opportunities up, whether some people are just not supposed to be together, or whether the counseling mediation doesn't work. And it's a big question for the first one, but also I should have broken you in gently. But yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yes. Well, I think that there are more opportunities out there, and I think the knowledge of those opportunities for counseling and therapy, especially dealing with marriage counseling, is growing.
Mhm.
But I don't know for sure, obviously, but I could venture to guess it's the same problem with like someone going to the gym or getting a personal trainer. In other words, you can go there, but you've got to do the homework, and there's a lot of work that has to be done in between the sessions, and it's not going to be a quick fix. Any long-term relationship is difficult. I mean, it's hard and it takes a lot of work. And when you have problems, it takes even more work to fix it. So I think that, only knowing when people come to see me, most of the time, the marriage has already broken down. There are a few occasions where people have contacted me and I've asked them questions and I've kind of explored the reasons for the breakdown of the marriage. And it turned out that I actually sent them to go maybe get some marriage counseling. So it didn't seem like their answers were indicating to me that it really was the end. Not all efforts had been tried, but by and large, most people are coming to me and the marriage is long gone. So one of the questions I routinely ask, just as part of my background information, is, have you tried counseling? Have you tried marital counseling? And there's a very high percentage of people who say yes. When I ask them how many times you went or how long it lasted, it's a very short period of time, or it was stops and starts. Well, we started, 15 years ago and we went maybe 3 times. Then we went, whatever it was, like 8 years ago, and we went twice. And then, so, to me, it shows that there's an effort there, but it takes both people to buy in, right? Both people have to be committed to any kind of therapy. Otherwise, it's just ever going to work. And you need to give the therapist enough time to work, and you need to comply and do the work in between. So that's just my guess. Of course, I don't see when the therapy works, right? I only see
I guess not.
work. So it's hard for me. I can only say, what I see is not working, is it doesn't seem to me like the time was put in.
Yeah.
But I don't know for sure.
No, it makes sense. It's like a lot of things, isn't it? We are a society that expects a quick fix. So we might have put on, I don't know, £25 over the last 5 years, but we expect to lose it in a month. And it's a bit like, I guess it's a bit like
Yeah.
a marriage. So the problems haven't suddenly arisen. They've been going for quite a while. So you might have been feeling differently about your partner for a number of years, but then you expect things to be fixed in 3 45-minute sessions. And if you don't do the work in between, it doesn't, nothing happens really.
Yeah, it's almost like you're setting yourself up for failure, you know. And again, I think it takes both parties to be fully committed to the process. I do,
Yeah.
again, knowing on the back end, I know that some people just go through it just to go through it. I think maybe they, because the other party wanted to, but they didn't really want to, but then, or just to satisfy some, you know, they check off a box. Well, we tried that. Or maybe they didn't want to be blamed or feel guilty. So those people who are actually admitting that to me at the end, you know, they really weren't committed to begin with. So I don't know how
Yeah.
you could expect it to help, you
No.
know, if you're not going in it with an open heart and open mind.
And when did you realize that the law was going to be your chosen career? And then second, sort of part B, when did you then realize that divorce was going to be your chosen specialty?
Um, I had decided on law really early on. I was really lucky. I wasn't one of those people who were, you know, wondering, what do I want to
Yeah,
do?
yeah.
I think I was like in eighth grade, seventh or eighth grade, and somehow, I don't know really why, but I knew that that's what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
I didn't know what area, but I just liked the idea of debating. I liked the idea of researching, and the whole back and forth. I
Mhm.
just liked that. Advocating, sticking up for people, would have been what I would have said back then. So when I was in college and then also in law school, I took advantage of different opportunities in different areas for both work and some
Mhm.
like an internship. So I did stints in various areas of law. So, like, I worked for a big insurance company firm. I clerked at a court for a while. I even interned at like a jail for like the jail library for, you know, at one point. Um, different avenues. And then I ended up in a small firm. And I was able to, and I liked that small firm feel where I was representing individuals instead of family members. And I liked the idea of doing the one on one, the personal.
Yeah.
And I was able to, since I started there as a paralegal, I was able to try out, by helping the partners, I was able to try out a bunch of different, or experience a bunch of different areas.
Mhm.
And somehow I gravitated towards the family law. In fact, at one point, the attorney that was doing most of the family law was going to give that area up. They were just going to start farming it out because it was too emotionally draining for him. Um, you know, he can handle any other matter, even high stakes matters, and it wouldn't bother him. He wouldn't take it home. But the family matters, he wasn't able to leave at the door. So I was part of that conversation because it was a small firm. And I said, gee, I kind of like that area. So they decided to keep it on and then basically transfer it to me. And that became, as I became an attorney, because by that time I had passed the bar and I was an attorney working for them as an associate. They said, all right, you know, we'll transfer this little by little to you. And then that could be your area. So I did that, and that was, like I said, that's about 30 years now, that I've been doing that area. It's not the only area I do, but it's by and large the great majority of what I do is all areas of family law. So mostly divorces, but then there's a whole slew of matters that happen after divorce.
Mhm.
So if someone's not following rules, that's, you go in for like a motion for contempt or defend a
Yeah,
motion
yeah.
for contempt. And then there's modifications if the orders need to be changed. There's restraining orders. There's custody matters where people were never married, but they have children.
Yeah.
There's child support matters. We have pre and post nuptial agreements, all that stuff. So I'd say about 50% of the work is the actual divorces, and then the other 50% of the family law work is either what we call post judgment matters after the divorces,
Mhm.
or matters between parents who weren't ever married.
It's very varied then, isn't it? Sometimes you hear a divorce law, you think, okay, is divorce. Divorce is divorce is divorce. But I guess all the different elements to it, keep it very interesting and novel. And so when you were working for the other attorneys, and they said that they perhaps struggle more with the emotional content of family law, etc., and they carried it with them. How do you protect your mental well-being? 'Cause you must hear some traumatic stories that nobody needs to hear. And how do you leave behind? Sounds like it's all very cold and leave behind. I'm not saying leave, but how do you
Yes.
make sure you look after yourself?
Yeah,
Really?
I understand. I am able to leave it at the office door.
Hmm.
I just am. When I'm in the office or otherwise working on cases, I'm all in. And I'm very empathetic, and you know, I really kind of walk through the fire with my clients, and I do my best to kind of take on their emotional burden and make
Hmm.
everything easier for them. And it's draining. I mean, there's no way around it. People either, I meet other attorneys, and if they don't know me or they don't know what I do, and of course they'll ask what area of law. And if they don't do family law, they hear family law or divorce, and they instinctively take a step back.
Yes. Oh
And
my goodness.
they
Yes.
either you do family law or you've
Hmm.
done a divorce once and you will never do it again. That's kind of typically what I hear. So I am able to leave it at the door. I do have, I'm able to set boundaries. So although all my clients have my cell phone and all my clients text me, and I may answer on a Sunday or a Saturday or 10 o'clock at night, they know that that's if it's convenient for me. You know what I mean? If I can do it, then I can do it. But if I can't, just because I got the text on a Saturday at 5 o'clock, you may not hear from me until Monday. And we kind of established those parameters right from the beginning. I don't want someone not to reach out to me because
Hmm.
obviously, if it's an emergency,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and sometimes it's just convenient for someone to communicate at odd times or non-work times. So I don't
Mhm.
want to discourage that, but communication is key, right, for your attorney. And that's a lot of people complain that their attorneys are bad communicating with them. But so I say it right from the beginning, this is how we're going to work. You reach out to me whenever, and then but I may or may not on off hours. So I keep those boundaries, because that's important for my obviously my family life and my personal life as well. It's one thing to be committed, but you also have to be committed to yourself and your family, right? You need
Mhm.
to give them priority as well. So and I just take a lot of coffee and tea breaks, and I have a glass of wine at the end of the day is always helpful.
Yeah.
So, and when it gets real stressful, obviously, I mean, it seems very, very basic, but I will go for occasional massages if I have, because it gets, when I start to feel that neck tense up
Mhm.
or the back hurt, if I'm too tense, then that's what I do. I go get fixed, and that helps. I do believe that in order for me to be effective, I have to be, my mental and physical well-being has to be a priority in order for me to be my best self for everybody else.
100%. And yeah, I really like the fact you said about having your physical body works on as well. So a lot of time we think, oh, I'm feeling stressed. It's all mental stress, and I'm being tense and all. But I think a lot of the time our body holds stress. I always get real. I hold my stress in my gut and my back. So same as you. I
Mhm.
think if you have somewhere releasing it, it's it's a very good physical feeling. And then, like say, you can turn up for your family, turn up for your clients in a much better shape. Really,
Yes.
one thing you mentioned a couple of times already that I do think is super important is communication. And I think when I was reading, I think some of the main reasons given for divorce are a lack of commitment, people argue too much, there's infidelity, and I think a lot of that seems to be about communication. And do you find that when you talk to clients that they haven't communicated enough with one another? And do they find it easy to communicate with you?
They do. They often tell me right from the beginning that they feel very comfortable with me, that they are able to just confide in me and tell me things that without feeling funny about it.
Yeah.
Um, I've always been told that. I don't know why, but that's something that I don't know. I think it's empathy. I think they can
Yeah.
sense that I am, you know, willing to listen to them and to understand them.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, communication is huge, and communication is something that we get wrong, very often. And again, especially um, with the people that we're closest to, which seems, ironic, really. Um, but I mean, it's just because people are we're complacent, we're lazy, we're tired, right? We give of ourselves away, and then really the family is really usually gets the worst of us, unfortunately. Which is why, again, I think it's really important, and to try to take care of yourself, because you just need that. I don't think people should
Mm.
feel guilty for that. Um, but what I see a lot with marriages, I mean, a lot of times there's like a big reason why the marriage ended, right? There's either like there's like an infidelity that happened,
Yeah.
or there's been financial infidelity, or
Hmm.
there's substance abuse, or there's physical or mental abuse, or there's like a big issue. Um, I'd say that's maybe half of the cases. The other half of the cases, people really just, they've grown apart, they say, or they're just arguing too much, or they can't talk to the other person. And when, again, I want to understand them. I need to understand them. So I'm asking them a lot of questions,
Mm.
especially at the beginning. You have a 20-year marriage or a 15-year marriage. It's a lot of information. So I do ask questions, and it seems that it's very easy to fall into a pattern where if things aren't working out, and again, this goes back to the work, right? If things aren't working out, then what happens is at some point someone loses interest, or they stop trying, and then the other person stops trying. Then often they will live in this kind of parallel lifestyle where I guess the flip saying is, it is what it is, right? Like
Yeah.
that's that. But that's a kind of a, I know people use that term lightly, but that's kind of a really destructive mentality, I think, because what you're
Hmm.
saying is it can't get better, it can't change, like, and you're just going to accept what it is. Now, with some things, it is what it is, and you just have to accept that. And I actually have that conversation sometimes with people who are they're already divorced, and they're constantly having the same problems with the ex-spouse. And
Yeah.
at some point I tell them, you can't change somebody, and then we have that conversation, and I said, you need to make other arrangements, like if he or she is going to be late every single time, expect it, instead of getting angry over it, because that's
Yeah.
self-help, right? So there are times when it is what it is, and we have to, that's just a reality we have to accept. But I think what I'm talking about is a lot of times people will reach that end too fast. It is what it is, without really putting in the work, because again, we're lazy, right? We take the path of least resistance, and I'm including myself. That's how we are. That's how humans are built, and we really have to be motivated to make change. We have to be motivated. There has to be some kind of pain point or something dire to make us change and do something. So when we fall into this pattern of not talking, it only goes wider and wider and wider. And if if otherwise the bills are getting paid and the kids are
Yeah.
being taken care of, then it just becomes a very easy
Mm.
lifestyle. And then all of a sudden 10 years goes by, and people go, we haven't even, we really not have been living together as
Yeah.
spouses. We're just living together, and then eventually one person will even start sleeping someplace else. So they've been sleeping. So a lot of people come to me, and they've already been in this pattern of living. Um, and again, if you could have rewound it all the way back to when maybe the problems first started with communication, because that's usually where it breaks down.
Mm.
One person's doing something that the other person doesn't like. One person's saying something that the other person doesn't like, and they never really get to the root of it. They get into a little tiffs about it, and then it's like dominoes, like one person says something, the other person says something, and it's just like it's like it plays over and over again, and then people just stop doing it. One of the things that I've noticed with mediation, so I do a lot of litigation, but I'm trying to grow the mediation practice. But one thing that people will say to me is, "Oh, we've already tried talking. It's never going to work out. We can never work out." And I explain to them that mediation is kind of a chance to reset. I said, because I'm going to now be sitting in the room with you, and it's going to force the two of you to kind of think about what you say before you say it. So more often than not, first of all, you're going to think before you open your mouth, right? Because I'm there. Someone else, there's a new element now. Someone's watching you, but you're also going to, most likely what we want to do, and what I try to tell people to do is, say something constructive, not destructive, right? Like you could still get your point across, but it's how you get your point across, and how we speak matters. It really does, because what you say and how you say it is going to then cause a reaction in the person that's hearing it. So if we can just, communicate better, then that, it can really change the course of the future. So for mediation purposes, obviously at that point the marriage has broken down, but hopefully the skills that they've learned in mediation will carry through after the divorce. And especially if you have children, like, you're not done with your ex, right? I mean, you still could have many years, and hopefully they use those skills that they've learned in mediation going forward, and it will help them. And if they have trouble, then maybe they can even go back to mediation, and they can, instead of trying automatically going to litigation and arguing and fighting and falling back into the same old routine. Now, I have no place in, before the marriage is broken down, like in the marriage. That's something that people have to kind of consider, maybe should consider again, hopefully with a therapist, working on communication. I think that's probably what therapists probably try to work on, as opposed to let's fix your marriage. The first thing should be like the building blocks. Let's work on communication, let's work on, and I assume that that's what they do. But again, they got to put in the work. It's easy. It's easier to just go back to the same old routine.
It is. I think you're very, very right in that saying. I think having a conversation between two people that probably don't really want to have the conversation, and paying somebody to facilitate a conversation is very, very different. You do feel like, you really want to be more thoughtful about what you're saying, rather than just saying something and somebody storming off and ending up the same way it always does. Having somebody there to actually ask questions and prod and pry a little bit, I think it makes it very, very different. Yeah, for sure. When people come to you and they decide that they're going to get divorced, etc., are you finding that there is truth that more older people are getting divorced now? Maybe when people have had their children, the children have gone off to college, or the children are in a relationship of their own, and the children move out, and suddenly couples look at one another and think, oh gosh, yeah, you're here as well, as well as the children. And then they and I say that sort of flippantly, but you know what I mean? Because a lot of time as parents, we spend so much time focused on our children, we don't necessarily invest the same amount of time in them. The relationship just ticks along, and then when suddenly almost the reason you were together is gone. Yeah, is that one when people sort of look at themselves and sort of think, oh, and maybe I have got another 30 years to go or whatever. Do I really want to be in this marriage for that long? Is that becoming more and more of a thing now?
Yes, absolutely. Especially in those cases where the parties have been kind of, living those parallel lifestyles.
Yeah.
That's the time, when the kids are finally gone. That's the time when they really start to reassess. And I think people, maybe in the past, if they were, older, it would have just been, oh well, we'll just maintain the status quo. I'm comfortable, and I guess comfort and security were probably the reasons that
Yeah.
that that really, I guess, are not doing it anymore. In other words, people, the common refrain is, um, I don't want to just be, you know, okay. I want to be like really happy. I want to enjoy my life. I don't want to be living, it's not enough anymore, even
Mm.
though it may be financially secure and maybe it might be comfortable, right?
Mhm.
Because you know what you have. Um, and but it's not enough. It's not that's kind of what they tell me. They want to, they, not that I'm even asking it, but that's what they share for me, because I'm asking them questions. Why are we here? And they I guess they envision themselves, people are living longer,
Yeah.
they're living, many people are living more proactive, or
Mhm.
active lives, healthier lifestyles. It's
Yeah.
not, it's not like you're just, working, retiring, and then staying home anymore. People are just, they're launching into second and third careers.
Yeah.
They're kind of reinventing themselves. They're going ballroom dancing. They're doing hobbies. They're traveling. Um, it's just, I guess it's just different. It's just
Mm.
different, and they don't want they want to change. They don't want to stay in that marriage anymore.
One of the things that surprised me when I was looking at some of the statistics, and statistics, they're just numbers ultimately, but the suggestion seemed to be that the higher number of marriage you're on, the more likely you are then to get divorced. So I would have thought that you sort of get all the shit out of the way in the first marriage, and then actually the second marriage you'd be much, much better at it. But it seems to be no. Actually, if you divorce once, then the likelihood is you get divorced again and then get divorced again. Well, is that just people not learning from the mistakes, or what? I guess
Uh,
there's always lots of individual reasons, but I was really surprised that the numbers went up as the number of marriages went up.
I believe it. I'm still surprised by that statistic, because I would think the same thing you would. Was that
Mm.
okay? Like, now you know yourself better. You know what you want in a partner better, and you would
Mhm.
think that, the chances of success, I would think, would be higher.
Yeah,
Um, but that's not the case. So again, I can only tell you what people tell me,
Mhm.
and I only see that the when it doesn't work out,
Yeah.
it is in it, or what I see, um, is that, you know you, for lack of a better term, like, you come with a lot more baggage, right, at the
Yeah, you
on
do.
a
You
second
do.
and third marriage. You have to now, most of the time, you're navigating other children. I think that is something that people don't maybe fully, and maybe I wouldn't either, fully anticipate that.
Yeah.
And you would think, the children are grown, they're on their own, but it's not. There's a lot of people have, and I don't know if they didn't have that conversation beforehand, but um, either they think that the spouse is maybe, coddling the adult children too much, or
Mhm.
spending too much money on the adult children,
Yeah.
or they think the adult children are, in some cases they're moving back in with them, and that causes a problem, or they're just it's not always the children, but I'm hearing that a lot, that's, or
Yeah.
just other family members. So I just think that that's it. It's a challenge, I guess, that should be expected, but maybe not. Maybe it's not, as it's not talked about, I guess, or maybe not,
Yeah.
acknowledged, that maybe we should, figure this out beforehand. So I think that's a problem. And then, of course, either one or both often have exes that
Yeah.
sometimes are still in the picture because of children, and sometimes that causes a problem. Um, and then, other than that, I don't know. See, like, finances, I would think, should have been talked about beforehand. So that is something that, you would think that wouldn't be a problem. But I don't hear so much that that's an issue, because most of the time, again, the people that I'm seeing on that end, that's just usually not an issue, because they've kept their finances separate a lot. A lot
Mhm.
of times they've only commingled what they want.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know. The only other thing I can think of is that maybe going through the divorce the first time, maybe because a lot of people are very hesitant, for
Yes.
the reason, and maybe they're not as hesitant. Like, they don't want to, if they see something going downhill, I think they're actually quicker to get out. That's my personal, just
Yeah.
assumption, that
Yeah.
they're not going to wait that long and they're going to get out. But again, I mean, you gotta, I guess, uh, you got to give it for optimism for going for number three.
Absolutely,
Number three.
absolutely. You, I mean, it's hard in a way, isn't it? You think, well, gosh, if they've had you as their attorney and you've done a great job and you've made it as straightforward as possible, then, hey, this is great. That wasn't too hard. It's always, if you've been through a nightmare divorce, you think, oh, I'm not going to do that again. But yeah, it's kind of hard, really. But I do think, yeah, I think once you get into that 2 and 3, just not. I've had friends where, gosh, one parent has refused to go to the wedding if the partner of their ex is there, or all that sort of, who sits on the top table, who walks now, all that sort of stuff becomes, it just creates so many complexities that you never think of when you just, first of all, you've been divorced, you sort of meet somebody else, think, oh, this is great, wow, this person's nothing like my ex. But then, and there may well not be, but the situation around them with family and then grandchildren, and like you say, money and finance and stuff, and well, you're spending all the money on the kids. What about my kids now? And where does the inheritance go? The wills, all that sort of stuff becomes, yeah. But yeah, credits
I,
people for giving it another go. Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, it would be great. I'm sure some people discuss it, but I
Mm,
don't know. My personal belief is that there should be a lot more discussion even before a first marriage between people. They should
yeah,
have a hard discussion about finances. They should have a hard discussion about what their values are and what they expect. In the next 5 years or 10 years. I mean, you don't have to map out your whole life, but
yeah,
there's just a whole lot of people that come to me and they say from the beginning, they're like, oh, we should have never got married from the beginning. Oh, we started fighting 2 weeks after we got married. Oh, we should, and it's a little bit of a head scratcher. But certainly on a second or third marriage, you would think they have these, again, it just, I guess we don't know what we don't know, and like love is blind, right? So you just jump in. But uh, especially if you're commingling two families, you
oh gosh,
I
yeah,
don't know. I would just think that there would be longer conversations about that.
yeah,
But people are finicky about what they talk about, and they're gun shy about talking about certain things, especially finances, which really that should be first and foremost, since that is a big cause of dispute
yeah.
during marriages. So they should have that conversation. I think it would go a long way, but
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
hard.
what they say that
Again, it's hard. People
it
don't.
is, but they say, well, the two things we don't talk about are money and sex, and I think, and they're pretty important in a marriage, you would hope. But I do think if you get into a marriage and you find out that your partner's a spender and you're a saver, or yeah, or people just have different views about money. It's yeah. I mean, it's hard, isn't it? Because money, things aren't that important, but your values and beliefs in money, whether you're going to set up a college fund for the kids, or you expect them to do everything by themselves, or you pay pocket money, or you don't pay pocket money. It's an allowance rather. It's something you should talk about, really.
Yes.
Do you find that people that have prenuptial agreements, which to some people I'm sure can sound very unromantic, do they tend to be more successful in their marriage because they've obviously talked about that stuff in detail, and they've created a contract basically, haven't they?
Correct. Again, I only see the failures. I don't see the ones that work
Firstly, yeah.
out. And I have, certainly I've had cases that had, prenuptial agreements
Mhm.
that were getting divorced. But I do think that I would venture to guess that those marriages probably, and again, I don't have any statistics
Mm.
I would be interested to know if there's
Mhm.
statistics out there that do they stay together? Is there a greater chance of success? I would think so, simply because they're forced to have that financial
Yeah.
discussion. They're
Yeah.
forced to have, because the attorney, and I tell people when they call me, they'll call me and they'll say, we're looking for a prenuptial agreement, and they'll say that they want like one little term, like that's all they're interested in. I'm like, oh. I'm like, you're gonna have to talk about a lot of stuff before we get to that one little term. And I
Yeah.
tell them, I say, look, I said, everything is, fine and nice, and you just want this to go easy. And I said, the attorneys are not trying to make it difficult, but we need to ask those questions, and you need to have some uncomfortable conversations, because we need to know what to put in this prenuptial agreement. We need to know whether you had, either you're knowingly not agreeing to something, and then that's going to just go by the wayside. In other words, it'll be the way it is, whether you pass, die, or whether you get divorced, or we have to address it, and you guys have to kind of agree on it now, how it's gonna, what the term is going to be, what the result is going to be.
Yeah.
So, and no one wants to have that conversation, but I suppose it's like going and when you're drafting wills, who wants to have that conversation? But you, especially if you have children from prior relationships, it's just because you really got to figure that stuff out. So and that's why a lot of people do get prenuptial agreements, is because it's their either a second marriage, or at least or they have children from a prior relationship, maybe not a marriage. And they want to protect those children. So they're forced to discuss it, which I think is a good thing. And I tell people, I go, look, you'd rather discuss the issues now when everything is good. And number one, know if there's a big problem, because then you can deal with it, right? Then later. And do it now while everything is, you don't want to have the discussion when you don't like each other anymore. It's going to be that much harder, during a divorce than to discuss it now.
I think the comparison to wills is very well made. I remember my granddad didn't have very much, but there was a house, and it was not complicated but straightforward. But his response was, "I'm not going to die tomorrow. Wishing I was dead, are you?" And it's a bit like, I guess with a prenup, it's like, well, yeah, but we're in love. We don't need that. And I think just getting out in the open, writing down a bit of paper, writing it down a bit of paper isn't saying you're going to die tomorrow, Granddad. And it doesn't mean you're more likely to get divorced. It's just that we've actually had a conversation, and you're taking away the stress for people in the future. You're taking away the stress for your kids. You're taking away the stress for say if the marriage does end up, then okay, well, at least we know this part sorted out. So we can worry about the other stuff, but this part, at least we've done that in advance. When, like you say, we're in a good place.
Sure.
One of the things I was surprised at, I don't know, you're an incredibly busy attorney. You don't get a huge amount of rest or time to yourself. Two questions, I guess. How on earth did you find time to write your book, and what compelled you to write it?
Well, I did a lot of weekends, and I did a lot of 4:30 in the mornings. That was really the only way it was going to get done. And I did it over the course of a long period of time. It wasn't, a fast process. So that's where I fit it in when everybody else was sleeping, basically. And I did it because one of the things that we offer at my firm, which I don't think is common, and still is not common even 30 years later, is a free phone consultation. Now, it's geared for like 15 minutes. It's not like your basic hour-long conversation. And I'm not able to give legal advice over the phone, obviously. But what it enables people to do is call me up and at least make that phone call and talk to an attorney, because that's a scary thing, right? Just reaching out and hearing and saying the words, I think I need a divorce, or I'm going to be going through a divorce. Making sure that, number one, I can help them with their matter, like, making sure that they're calling me within my area of practice. Getting some general principles of law, or dispelling some myths, like a very typical, thing. Someone will call me up and say, my name isn't on the house. Does that mean that, that I don't have any, that I'm out, like I don't have any ownership in it? And the answer is no, so that I can answer. That's easy. In Connecticut, it does not matter whose name is on it. It's just all goes into the marital pot, so to speak. So-and-so says that if I file, that I'm going to be, out on the streets, or that I'm not going to be able to, I'm going to lose this, or I'm going to lose that. So those things, I can easily say that, no, that's not, that someone's just trying to bully you or scare you. And I can just get that. So those initial fears, I can just get away. But then really, once I find out what kind of matter it is, and then just maybe answer like a few basic questions, I can then tell them really quickly the basic procedure that they can expect. And the basic costs that they can expect going forward, because those are the biggest questions. Like, other than, am I going to get kicked out of the house, or am I going to, does it matter if I'm the plaintiff or the defendant? Like, that's like a really easy, So other than those basic questions, really what people want to know is, like, again, it's the fear of the unknown. What am I looking at for procedure? And no one ever, like you say, no one wants to talk about sex and money. Well, no one wants to really talk about fees either. They're afraid to ask. So I just go, whether they ask me or not, I just go right into, this is the breakdown. This is what, we require retainer. These are the types of retainers. These are the amounts. These are the hourly rates. This is the expected, amount. This is the minimum amount you'll spend. This is what it could be. And I can sense right away that there's just relief, because I'm just giving them all that information. Now, that is just a very small amount of information, right? But what I've learned over the years is that information is power, right? That's what the knowledge is, power. So, because the whole idea of divorce, the whole process is a lot of it is fear, right? There's a lot of fear that's associated with it. And when people are fearful, they do things that are not in their best interest, or they don't, they don't help themselves because they're afraid to ask the questions. And it just causes a lot more angst than needs to be. And they can't be focused. Like, I'm asking them to do X, Y, and Z, but they're worried about A, B, and C, and that anxiousness, I have to believe, trickles down to, to their children, because if you're nervous, then, so over the years, I've tried to just, my partner and I have always tried to give as much information as possible, because we found that immediately, it lowers that fear factor, and then makes them more able to understand what we're saying. It makes them a better client. So the more knowledgeable the client, the better the client. And I felt that it was better for the whole family, especially the children. But obviously, there's only so much information that I can give. So I give on, without start charging them. But, so we give the free phone consultation. Then we started for years and years, we started writing articles that we would, post in different places, but we post on our website. And then we started doing talks, with the, local business meetings and other, civic organizations. And it was the same thing. People would come up to me, oh, I'm so happy you gave us that info. We would pick a topic, general topic to pick, dealing with law. I'm so happy you gave us that information. You're so, you're approachable, or I can't, you're not what I thought an attorney would be. So it would be, that combination of, there's this idea, maybe with doctors and lawyers, that there's this wall that people can't get to them. So we wanted to be approachable. We wanted to be not scary, right? So again, if people are afraid to contact an attorney, they don't contact an attorney. The longer you wait, usually the worse it is, especially for other matters, financial matters that my partner handles. So we wanted to be accessible. So over the years, people would always comment on the information, how grateful they were, how good, all your articles are, they were easily understandable. And then eventually, your talks, they would ask, do you have a book, or do you have more information? I wish I could get more information. So it really just evolved from there. So I always used to say, well, I wish I could give more information, but it's like, how do you do that, And then obviously people would say book. And people said, and then one person looked at me and said, you need to write some of this, all of your articles, kind of combined into a book. So of course, it's not that easy, but I did take the articles, and all my years of knowing what the common questions were, I was able to then organize chapters, and I was able to say, this is the most common information that people need. This is the information that I can give them without actually giving them legal advice, but you're giving them guidance. And really, it was just meant to be kind of a springboard. That's how I promote the book. It's kind of a springboard for you to then work with your attorney. It's not meant to be like a self-help, like all you need is a book and you're good.
Divorce DOI.
It gives you all of the background information so that it helps you work with your attorney. Really, it helps you understand the different processes. It helps you understand the different options you have with pricing, with representation. It helps you understand the different, with divorce, like there's there's mediation, there's litigation, and then there's also something called collaborative divorce. So I break down what those processes are. Again, you're not going to be an expert, but you're going to then have at least that base information so that when your attorney is talking to you about a proceeding, or as something like a deposition or an interrogatory, you're going to say, oh, I know what that is because I already read it. So it does two things. It gives the client more confidence in proceeding, and it also reduces the amount of time they have to spend with the attorney explaining things, which hopefully will reduce their costs, because most attorneys charge on an hourly basis. And I think ultimately, it should help all attorneys, because again, I really do believe that the more educated your client is, the more they can help you. I always say that, we're a team. It's not just, I'm not just doing this on my own. It's your divorce. I'm helping you. So you need to help me. And that's what I hope the book does. But it was a big project.
Did you enjoy the process of writing it?
I did very much. I do enjoy writing, and I knew that from the articles.
Yes.
So that wasn't a deal breaker for me. It was just a matter of the time and trying to get it all together. That was a little bit of a challenge.
It's like a lot of things, I guess, whether it's a family member dying, you're trying to sort out the funeral, or you're deciding to have children. But until you're actually doing something like that, you don't really think about it. And then you suddenly think, oh my goodness, so divorce or funerals, is $10,000 reasonable? Should I be seeing this person once a week? Should I be seeing them once a day? What does it all look like? And I think, that's when some objective, reliable knowledge, just as a background, so you feel some level of comfort. Because not a lot of us haven't been into attorneys' offices all that often. It's not normally for something we necessarily a positive experience. So going in there thinking, oh my gosh, what's it going to be like? And actually thinking, okay, well, I know a little bit. So when I use those words, I won't feel completely stupid.
Sure.
I know somebody's going to support me. And I think it's really, really important that people do try and educate themselves just a little bit.
I had a woman call me just the other day, so funny, and she called me for the phone consultation, and she said, I've never hired an attorney before. She goes, I don't even know what questions to ask or how to go about hiring or choosing an attorney. And I started laughing, and I said, well, there's a chapter on that.
Yeah.
I said, I know this is going to sound a little pitchy, but I'm like, I have a book. Here it is. I said, there's a whole chapter, and she was so happy. She goes, okay. And then I had another woman call up and say, she was talking about that she has children, and they think they're going to go by an agreement, and she's like, she goes, well, what do you do? And I go, well, I got to start thinking about a parenting plan. I said, so talk to your spouse about, what you, and again, that's easy for me to say. And she said, well, I wouldn't even know. She's like, well, what goes into a parenting plan? Like, what do I have to think about? And of course, for me, it's so second nature. And I said, I'm like, well, there's a chapter on that, And I said it breaks down all the things that you need to think about for that. So it's gratifying for me when I have people ask those questions, and I know that I've already provided that information, So I was like, okay, I did something right, So I tell them, and most of the time they're like, oh, I'm so happy, yes, I'm going to go get that information. I said, get the information, look at it. I go, and it'll give you that outline that and some people hire me now and they already have the book. They're like, oh, I have this. And one person, he came in and he had all these questions that he had developed for me based on my questions.
In the book.
That was kind of funny. It's gone full circle, But it's working. If it works, it works.
Absolutely. And so I've talked to quite a few people lately, and I think one of the things that's maybe changed in the last, I don't know, let's say 20 years, is the type of relationship or the type of commitment people make. So some people might well be together for 30 years and never have got married. So do the same kind of requirements exist within, I'm not sure what you call it in the US, like a sort of civil partnership. But I mean, there might be nothing formal. You've lived together in the same house 30 years, you've got 2 kids together, and basically you haven't ever been married. So you don't need to get divorced, obviously, but Where do you go to resolve that? Is that a divorce? Is that what you do as well?
Well, it depends on. You're saying if you're never married, if you're
Yeah,
just
if you've
living
been together
together.
25 years, everything's been as regular, but you just never got married. But now you just don't want to be together anymore. But obviously, you don't need to be divorced legally because you were never legally joined together, I guess.
Yes. Well, it depends on the state. So in
Okay.
Connecticut, where I practice, there's no such thing as common law marriage,
Okay.
which um, which really makes, years ago I tried to kind of educate people on like living together
Mm.
arrangement, basically contracts, but
Mhm.
it's not called prenuptial because they weren't getting remarried because
Yeah.
you're kind of really vulnerable if you know say if you're the spouse that, or it's not the spouse, but if you're the partner that changes, like financially changes your position, either you stop working or
Mhm.
or whatever, or you maybe spend down money that you have,
Yeah.
and then later on you just split. There's no, in other words, there's no support. There might be there's child support if you have children
Yeah.
together,
Yeah.
but
But not.
there's no alimony. There's no, they say there's no palimony. There's
Mhm.
just nothing that's there. So I get people who call me quite often in that situation, or they've said that they've invested money into like property, but now the property's not in their name. Now there's
Yeah.
some other methods that they may be able to go through, like housing court or maybe some contractual,
Mhm.
litigation, but it's not. It's there's nothing specific for people living together. So in that situation, it's even more important, but no
Yeah.
one does it to try to work out an agreement to protect the person who maybe is either giving up a career or
Yeah.
changing. Maybe they've moved. If they're
Mhm.
giving up something financially, there really should be something that some kind of protection in there for them.
Yeah.
But again, it's really hard. It's like a hard sell. It's like I said, it was like trying to sell a fire extinguisher when there's no fire.
Yeah.
So, trying to tell people who are living together and are happy that they should go see an attorney and talk about what happens if they split up is just a very hard sell. No one wants to do it. Um, but for a while I was banging the drum on that, trying to like alert people to this, and all I got were I got the I got the parents of the people who were living together who were concerned about this, but they couldn't get their adult children in. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So that was
It's
it
hard,
was
isn't it? Because I guess
I
obviously with a marriage, it's something that it happens. You get married, so something has changed in your status. But I guess if you've been living together a while and you just keep living together, nothing changes. There's not, or you might have kids, whatever, but there's no, nothing changes. So you think, well, if nothing's changing, then yeah, why bother? I suppose. But then you get to it when the house has always been in one person's name and you're giving it your career to look after the kids, and then suddenly it's like, okay, no, we're gonna break up now. It's like, my goodness.
Yeah, or someone has property. Maybe someone put a lot of
Yeah.
sweat equity into the property, but now they don't
Mhm.
have any really ownership interest in it. Or maybe someone received an inheritance and they
Yes.
spent all their inheritance on something while the other person put their money into the retirement. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? There's all kinds of decisions that
Mm.
if you don't think them through, and again, people don't, because why would you? You're together, everything's hunky dory, and then at the end, one person could be at a real serious disadvantage
Yeah.
financially. Um, and that's
Mm.
just something that every once in a while I have that situation where I have the unfortunate job of
Mm.
telling them that they have very little recourse, or at least through me I can't help them.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard, isn't it? And I think it gets, or is potentially getting more complex. I talked to a lady recently who's a very strong advocate for polyamorous relationships, and she has two partners, two men in her life, and she was saying there's no legal protection for anything. So the three of them might bring up a child together. They might share and cohabit in different houses and things. But she said, yeah, one of her big things is trying to, exactly as you said, trying to advocate for actually, let's just get something down in writing because this is quite complicated. We're all very happy right now, but if something does happen, then nobody's protected, and it becomes so much more complicated. But do you think the law will catch up with common law situations, with the different dynamics that seem to be evolving?
I mean, the law is always evolving, so I
Yeah.
guess it's possible. It's possible.
What is it like when you are?
Like I said before, like anyone can even without that, certain law dealing with that certain relationship, anyone can draft contracts
Yes.
between, each other, or an attorney, really
Mhm.
attorneys that draft it. But I mean, they can enter into it just like you would enter into any, you kind of have to
Yeah.
think of it as a business partnership, even
Mhm.
though it's a relationship. It's you just kind of, I know it sounds very unromantic and it sounds very cold and mechanical, but really, if you look at it as a business partnership,
Yeah.
and what would you do to protect your business partnership and your
Absolutely.
investment, then
Yeah.
really that's what it boils down to. That's how, no one, it's only because it's a relationship, an intimate relationship, that people
I
aren't
know. It's
kind
that.
of protecting themselves. But they would never do that, what they're doing, with like just a third party that they're going into business with. You know what I mean? So it's really kind of a
Yeah.
mind shift
Yeah.
that you have to think about it. And again, it's just, I guess, because there's that intimate relationship, people feel uncomfortable um, to do that, but they really should.
It's those words, and it? Love
Because
and
because the real,
romance that makes us think that, well, this is different now. It's not a business. We're in love, and that's never going to change. But you just look around and see how often it does change. Really, well, one of the things that I think must be challenging for you sometimes is you're obviously very forward looking, and the book sort of really demonstrates that. But do you still sometimes come across is the right word, opponents, people that are working for one spouse, you're working for the other spouse, and they just have a very different view of how things go? Or do you find it's more that hopefully most divorce lawyers try and come to some sort of equitable agreement?
um, well, it depends on the attorney. I mean, that's one thing when people call me up and they say, I think we're going to be able to work this out, amicably, even though there might be going through the traditional litigation process,
Yeah.
because you could still file for litigation and it can still be amicable. So it
Mhm.
doesn't have to be, knockout, drag out, contested matter just because you're going through litigation, the traditional route. But I tell them, they say, well, I don't think it should be that difficult, and they're kind of looking for me to say, oh, yeah, it won't be that difficult. But honestly, the first thing I say was, well, it depends on who, I said, I don't know anything about you or your spouse. I said, but I
Yeah.
said, really, it depends on the other attorney, too, because unfortunately, I have had plenty of occasions where, I'm being told, of course, I'm never talking to the other spouse, right? But I'm being told by my spouse that the, attorney is doing something, the opposing attorney is doing something different than what the spouse is directing. Now, maybe the spouse is lying to her, I don't know, or
Yeah.
lying to him, but I've seen, sometimes I've been there in court and I see this, I see the spouse telling the attorney to do X, and the attorney's not doing that. So that is a problem. I can't say it. There's, unfortunately, it doesn't happen a lot, but attorneys, for whatever reason, sometimes have their own, mind. Whether it's a, whether they're doing it, you know, as a means of protection, like they think they know better than the client, and they think that they're really helping the client, even though they're not
Yeah.
listening to them when they're really supposed to be listening to them. Or unfortunately, it could be, that they want to draw, run up the bill, and more billable hours, then the more money it costs, and then they'll wait until the end and then become more reasonable at the end, but they're going to be very unreasonable in the, throughout the process. That does happen,
Mm.
really. And again, I cover that in the book to kind of emphasize that your attorney, while they're, to a good extent, if you've picked out an attorney that, if you use the tools of the book to pick out an attorney that's working in your best interest, then by and large, you should listen to your attorney. But I make it very clear that you are still the one that's in charge. In other words, you are the client. The attorney at the end of the day has to listen to you. Unless you're
Yeah.
asking the attorney to do something that's unethical,
Mm-hmm.
then even if the client wants to do something that's the attorney does not agree with, the attorney can ask you to sign a piece of paper saying this is against my advice. I've even done that on occasion. But at the end of the day, it's the client's divorce. And sometimes
Yeah.
they want to pay more than they have to. Sometimes they want to accept less than they have to.
Yeah.
Sometimes they have other motives than doing the best they possibly can, and it's really, it, I can consult with them and tell them why I think that X, Y, or Z is not good for them. But at the end of the day, they have their own reasons, and whether they tell me or not, as long as it's a knowing decision,
Yeah.
I abide by that. I just had a woman who came to me. She jumped from another attorney because she went and said, "We have an agreement. This is what I want the agreement to be." And the attorney, I guess originally said yes, but the second he filed the paperwork, which again was not asking for things that's not what she wanted. And then, of course, the spouse said, "What is this? I thought we were going to do this, amicably." And she went and she confronted the attorney and she said, and I guess she said he made her cry. That he said, "You don't tell me what to do. I'm going to, this is the process and I'm going to go through the discovery and I'm going to do, and she's like, "I don't need to do all this discovery." So she was so upset. So she had called me and I said, "Look," I said, "What you're telling me, you sound like you know what you're doing." I asked her reasons. It wasn't like if I had thought she was being intimidated or if I thought that there was something, wrong with her thinking, maybe I would be a little bit more concerned. But there was nothing wrong with this woman, and she was making a very sound decision, and she was choosing knowingly not to do maybe X, Y, or Z that would the normal process, and she had her reasons. That was good enough for me. I said, "Well, absolutely." I said, "As long as you tell me that you want me to waive the normal discovery process," I said, "I'll have your, and I had the agreement written up within a week." And she was like, "How come the other attorney didn't do this?" And yeah, of course I can't. I said, "I don't know. I don't know."
Yes. No, yeah, that's
So, I mean,
professional etiquette. Yeah.
I do know we get very, maybe, paternalistic, or maternalistic, but, we have to know the attorney even has to kind of check ourselves once in a while. We have to know our boundaries. I know we're in protective mode all the time, and maybe
Yeah.
he was overzealous, but we have to know when to back off. There are lots of reasons why a client may not want, I had a client who wanted to get things over and just could not go into a contested matter because of her health. She had a
Mhm.
health condition and stress was going to make it worse.
Yeah.
So even though it killed me, that she wasn't getting as much as she was, I had to recognize that she had a bigger goal here, which was to
Yeah.
be healthy and to stay alive, right? So
Mm.
I had to bite my tongue. I had to let things go for the sake for her. So we have, even attorneys have to kind of like check ourselves once in a while.
Yeah. As long as you're comfortable that your client understands what the consequences of their actions are, and like I say, as long as you explain it to them and they've got good reasons for doing it. You've been very, very generous with your time. And I've got two more quick questions, if that's okay. For people that haven't got the book yet, and I'll put the links into the notes and everything. So please, well, if if you have a need for it, please go out and buy it. But so if somebody hasn't read it, so to avoid just typing into Google "good divorce lawyers Connecticut," how would somebody go about choosing a good attorney to represent them?
Well, there's a chapter on
Yeah.
that. But what you really need to do is obviously, just do your homework. So in other words, ask around for references,
Yeah.
not only people who have maybe been through divorce, but also, other attorneys. So maybe
Yeah.
you've had a closing attorney that you use if you bought
Mhm.
a house, or maybe you have done a will. Those
Okay.
people may
Yeah.
not do family law, but there's a good chance that they'll know good family law attorneys. So
Mhm.
those are two good choices.
Mhm.
But go on, once you get a couple of names, really go through the websites, read the white pages, see what kind of information they're giving you. go on, like, social media is full of recommendations now, so go in and see what other people are saying. There's always going to be good and bad with
Yeah, of
some
course.
people, so you got to take everything, you got to look at it holistically, like, look at it, don't take one person's
Yeah.
opinion, good or bad. Just, you got to look at everything. Like I said, investigate the website, but at the end of the day, reach out to that attorney. And, I do make a suggestion of a whole bunch of questions to
Mhm.
ask, like, literally interview the attorney. Again, it's work, and maybe people don't, they just want to rush into getting an attorney. It's something that's not fun to do. So, but there's a lot of people who've told me I shouldn't have rushed. I should have taken my time. I shouldn't have gone with the first attorney that was recommended. It's really important to find a good fit. And the only way you can really find a good fit is to ask those questions, see how they're answered, see how the attorney answers. And I don't mean legal questions, but
Yeah, yeah.
questions like, how do you communicate? Like,
Mhm.
are you the one that's going to be handling the case? What kind of support people do you have? And what can I
Yeah.
expect with regards to, a time frame of communications? What's expected of me? Like, me as the client.
Mhm.
I'm trying to think of other questions I had in there. You know, how do you approach, if you have a certain issue, how would you approach this? Or, the attorney's not going to be able to tell you obviously how your case is going to turn
Yeah.
out,
You
or
don't need
even
that now.
everything they'd be able to do. But
Mm.
by asking the questions and hearing their answers, you're going to get a sense of, you know, how they are. And one of the things I ask is, what's their personality like? Are they empathetic to your situation? Do you feel comfortable talking to them? Someone could be very competent, but you don't feel comfortable talking with them, or if you're intimidated by them, that's not going to be a good fit for you, because you have to really talk about everything, and you have to be a partner, and you have to make sure that they're not going to be one of these attorneys that just say, oh, don't worry about it, I'll do everything, and you don't have to participate. Like, you want to make sure that you are allowed to participate.
Mm.
um, so there's various questions that I have, and I think by going through the questions and
Mhm.
asking the attorney, and then I kind of tell you what to look for, and really trust your gut, how you're feeling. um, do you feel good? Did they provide the information? Do you feel like they have your back? Are you secure? If you don't say yes to all of those questions, then move on. That's not the person for
Yeah.
you. They could be good, but they're not good for you. And it's kind of a, most of the time, it's a longer relationship than even people would like, because the
Yeah.
process can be
Yeah.
long, and you really have to feel, it's such an important matter, and it affects your whole life. You've got
Sure.
to feel comfortable with the person.
And that's one of the reasons why I really want to commend you for having that sort of free consultation period before the before the charger starts charging. So people go and see a lawyer and they charge you from the second they see them. It's like, oh gosh, okay. You feel you've got to rush through things quickly because you've been charged by the hour. But having that almost getting to know your call, I think is I think people must find that invaluable. I think that's something that all attorneys should do. But I understand why some don't. But I think it's really
Yeah,
good to
I
do.
don't know why either.
Mm. And then my final question, and it may be too raw and too recent, but do you envisage writing another book?
Um, Possibly. That question comes up a lot.
Well, because the last one reads so well, and you quite enjoyed it, and it comes across as it's not stupid because it's a book full of words. It's very readable when I read through it.
Thank you. Yes, I think, if I've had a couple ideas. I think, there's some issues or common mistakes,
Yes.
that maybe could be made into chapters that
Mhm.
people can avoid, to doing, and maybe some more on communication. Maybe I was actually even thinking, maybe of, like, teaming up with maybe a therapist, and maybe
Yeah.
doing, like, having a topic, like a chapter for a topic, and then giving because I always say, even though I act like a therapist for my clients, I say I'm not a therapist, I'm not a mental health professional, but maybe
Yeah.
give, like, the legal response, and then maybe the therapeutic response, and how
Mm.
they, might play together. I thought that might be helpful for people. So yeah, so the thought's out there, but it's still soupy right now.
Yeah. No, I do think almost having one that's more mediation. Well, wrong around, I guess. More therapy mediation focused, as opposed to the divorcing. That would be really interesting, I think. Yeah, because a lot of people, they might have therapy, but they don't. It's disconnected. They don't quite understand what the difference is between therapy and then, well, is mediation not going to help us with therapy? No, it's not. It's almost, again. And how do you choose a good therapist? How do you choose a good mediator? All those good things. So yeah,
Yeah, with probably maybe a focus on like the parenting issues because those are the ones that linger.
yeah,
Because so many things come up after the divorce, I thought
yeah.
that might be helpful, especially to have the therapist in addition to the legal
Mhm.
opinion.
No thoughts of fiction?
No, no, no. I'm much too practical and realistic, unfortunately, for fiction. No,
Maybe when
I'm
you're,
not
if you
imaginative
ever
enough for that.
if you ever retire, maybe you could do a sort of the diary of a divorce attorney, and anonymized, of course. But I'm sure those tales will be fascinating in more ways than one. Yeah, there you go. That's 2 or 3 books at least. They keep you going.
There we go. There we go.
Thank you so much for your time. I've learned so much more, and yeah, I do think you've said all the way along, and you're a wonderful example of somebody that's good at this. Communication, communication with partners, communication with your attorneys, communication with your families, your friends, etc. It's just so important, isn't it? The better we are at communicating and being able to advocate for ourselves and reach out to a professional like you that can advocate for us, I think the better the world would be, really. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. I
You're
really appreciate it.
welcome. Thank you. Take care.
Will do.